Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abi.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
And hello.
And hello. Oh, I tried to beat you,
Yeah, you did try to beat me.
but I didn't beat you.
I'm surprised. Well, I don't even want to win today because you've been so grumpy. I was in the middle of having sex with her, and she just gave me this anger face.
No.
I was like, what's happening? Why are you so angry?
No.
She's like, I'm thinking about website stuff. What are you doing touching me there?
That is not a real story.
I made that up.
That's true. But
I
I'm
didn't make that up.
grumpy today.
I didn't make up that we had sex, but you weren't grumpy during sex.
I wasn't grumpy during sex. I'm just grumpy
You
today.
seemed very happy by the end of it, but then grumpy again.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
that's real.
Why are you grumpy today?
I think it's just like hormones. I'm on a medication. I don't feel good. You know how you're just like, meh.
Nah, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
Nah, I'm grumpy.
I try to when I'm
Grumpy.
grumpy, I try to like tell you I'm grumpy.
You do. It's really helpful when you're like, hey, I'm kind of grumpy. And I'm like, oh, at least I have a heads up so I don't get my head accidentally
Yeah, I want
bit
you
off.
to know this isn't about you.
Yeah.
Like if I'm giving you a Daria stare,
Uh-huh.
some people will get that reference, but most people won't. But if I'm giving you like a death stare where my eyes are shooting knives at you, you can know like, oh, that's not about me. That's just because she's funky.
I think that's one of the best things, like when you use open communication inside a language where you're like, hey, this is kind of going on inside of me today.
Yeah.
This isn't going to be about you. Then I just get to be like, oh,
She's crazy.
Look at crazy grumpy
Look at
pants
you,
over there.
crazy.
This doesn't have anything to do with
Who's
me,
got
does
some
it?
crazy in their eyes?
Only you say that in your head, but you don't say that out loud. You don't verbalize
No,
that.
no, you actually do stuff like this. You'll be like, who's got crazy in their eyes?
I do playfully,
Who's
and we
your
have a
little grumpy
relationship that's set up that
pants?
works that way.
Who's your little grumpy
However, there are men out
pants?
there that would do that, and it would escalate into an
Oh, it'd be
all-out
horrible.
World War III.
Yeah, I would say like one of the ways I've learned to cope with grumpiness is to be playful with you.
Yeah.
And so for me, when
Deliberately
you, like,
try and play.
Yeah, and there's no like jab that you do with it. You're
Yeah.
just like playing around, trying to break
Yeah.
the ice, and actually it helps me laugh and release a lot of the steam.
She came into the office, and she was kind of in her thing. I was like, Abby, look at me. Look at me. And then I did this amazing dance.
And then he dabbed,
I dabbed.
if you know what that
You know
means.
what dabbing is? She got dabbed.
Well, he's never even done it before, so it was pretty entertaining.
It was pretty entertaining because I saw some like 5-year-olds on Instagram dab. But we wanted to. One of the things that we wanted to do today is recently we released a podcast episode that talked about an
fight!
an explosion.
We fought it out. Pow, 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 pow.
And I walked away with a few bruises,
No.
which we won't make light of that, will we?
No, because actually there are men who actually are in abusive
I'm talking about heart bruises.
Oh my god, you're ridiculous. Although you know, when I was a kid, this is so ridiculous. As a kid, this is what I would used to do to tell my mom. I'd be like, "Ow, ow,
You'd say, ow.
ow."
This is new information.
Then she'd say, "What's hurting?" I'd say, "My heart hurts."
That's where you face palm a child and you say, grow up, kid.
Shove those emotions in a box and move on with life.
So anyways, we had this episode and we had a lot of people write in and be like, oh my God, that was so vulnerable. And I can't believe you guys talked about that type of stuff because.
And thank God you're being real because most marriages are going through stuff.
Yep. So all these marriages, like we all want the picture perfect Instagram.
And dating and all that stuff.
Yeah. Marriage, dating. We just want to act like we're better than we are as human beings.
1,000,000%. But the divorce rate is ridiculous. So clearly none of us have figured it out.
And just as a human being, we want to create this facade that says, I'm so amazing. But inside, if you got it in my head, you'd lock me up in jail
You'd be
for
like,
years.
I'm crazy in here. That's how I feel today. I'm crazy in here.
There's a murderous rage going on in my brain, and every one of my coworkers died today in my imagination. But if I said
that's
it out
never-
loud. loud.
That's not how I live.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. Yeah,
You've never. Well, your coworker is
everybody.
me. So really, if you go home and your coworkers in your head are dead, that's about me.
But the whole thing in this,
I like that you just said and then moved on.
Just gonna gloss right past that. I think about this idea, anger, the emotion of anger and rage, just anger as an emotion itself is one of the few emotions we're given permission to have, but it's also one of the most shaming emotions. There's a group that says the only emotion that you can express is anger. There's another group that says anger is the most horrible emotion that you can express. People. And so there's this mixture inside of culture that it's these two extremism happening. So a lot of times people are like, they learned how to have a lot of anger and now they feel a lot of shame for anger because they're feeling like...
As they should. Anger is the worst.
You should feel so shameful and
If you've ever had any anger, you are a horrible human. That's what this podcast is here to tell you.
That got confusing. I thought they're about breaking shame.
I'm just kidding.
So jokes aside, both Abby and I have had extensive journeys with our own anger.
What? I don't have anger.
Oh, please.
I fart joy.
Fart joy. Who says
I'm like a unicorn. I don't ever have bad days.
I
poop glitter.
Poop glitter. That would just mounds of glitter. That's just an odd thought in my head. That gets me on
glitter. You hate glitter so much that if I pooped glitter, it would be worse than me pooping poop.
I don't even know why you're on that topic, but it did get me on that commercial where there's that unicorn that's like...
For the poopy potty or the squatty potty?
Squatty potty, and it's pooping rainbows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's me. I don't have anger. I poop rainbows. That is such
a weird commercial. That should be Googled right now.
Okay, here we go. We're talking about anger. Let's... ADD.
So hulking out, we want to go into our history with anger. A lot of people don't talk about the anger that they have in their heart, or they don't know what to do with the anger that they do have outwardly. How do we process anger? Where does my anger come from? Why am I acting out in anger? Is anger itself a bad emotion? Is tempered anger healthy? Those are lots of
questions. We don't need to ask all of them. We're just going to answer them.
Well, they need to know what they're going to get
They need
answered.
to know what questions we're going to answer.
Yeah, they do. Because they're like, why am I listening to this? If nothing else, you're going to hear about us hulking out at each other.
Yes.
So,
okay,
history.
Let's start. Yeah, history. So I would like to say that there's the interesting thing is whatever you go into any relationship, you have what is culturally normal to you.
Yep, emotionally,
culturally normal. And then you have your friend or your boyfriend or your husband, whatever, whoever it is, they have what is culturally normal to them. Mm-hmm. So when me and you got married, so everybody has an anger culture in their family. Whether it's that we blow up to talk to each other, you have to be the loudest person to be
super
heard.
Intense, super loud.
Everything's intense.
You have to throw over a table.
No one ever is angry. We shove all of our emotions in.
We're all happy people. Land of the happy people. Everything's perfect.
Or like we do the passive anger, so it doesn't really count as anger. Yeah. But we're like making sarcastic jabs.
Mm-hmm.
Or
our anger comes out in sarcasm.
Yeah, or passive aggressive. Mm-hmm. So there's whatever you grow up in, you've got to understand that you are bringing the culture of what is normal to you.
And there is always a cultural rule or perspective about anger, whether it's spoken or unspoken. Yes. And the majority of the time, it is an unspoken rule that we haven't actually looked honestly at.
Now, here's the crazy thing is most of the time, what is normal to you, you can't even put into words because it's so normal to you. You haven't thought through what is my family's anger culture. Uh-huh. Like that's not a question most people think through. Like, right? What did my parents teach me about anger?
I don't know. We just yell at each other. We're just loud talkers.
Or I don't know. I never thought. So the thing is, when you get married, or when you do relationship with a best friend for a long time, or when you have conflict with a coworker, you've very quickly begin to realize. You have things that feel so like, how could they do that? But that might be normal in their culture.
Oh, yeah. You're totally shocked at like, why would you act like that?
Uh-huh. So when I got married, I don't think I did know this. So when me and Justin first met, he called me an ice queen. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And which is kind of funny. And he was being playful with it, but he was like, no, but really true. Like, you really are an ice queen.
Yeah, she was very hardened.
Totally.
Like, there was this part of her that was, like, beautiful and loving and expressive. And then this other part of her that was just, like, this stone wall inside of her soul.
Especially with men.
Yeah.
especially with men. And so I knew that I had walls up towards men. Like that actually gave me, and this is what I'm saying, it's not till you rub shoulders with somebody that you start to see what was your normal. So I didn't recognize that I had a nice queen part of me until you called it out. So then I started recognizing, oh, I do have that. And I had a lot of vows in my heart because my dad growing up was really angry.
Yeah. What does really angry mean or look like?
Yeah, because everybody's anger looks different.
Yeah. So one person came in here and goes, my dad was angry all the time growing up. And I was like, oh, really? Yeah, it was horrible. And I was like, well, what was it like? He would just get quiet.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm like,
That's
not my perspective though of what terrible anger is, right? Because I have a version of it.
That's the normal culture. Yep. But that actually hurts you as much as yelling does. Because having somebody just withdraw love, I have a client like that too. Her dad would get angry and would just like disconnect for days or weeks and not talk to anybody. So it creates this fear of punishment as much as people who've had yellers.
Yeah.
But so when you said that, I started recognizing. So when I grew up, it was like a war zone between my mom and dad. Like they were constantly in a battle. Yeah. They were constantly going after each other. They didn't agree on very much. It was fighting. Actually, the other day, Pizzi was talking about my childhood because sometimes you don't remember things. This is why it's so helpful having somebody that's known you. You don't remember things. And so having outside perspective helps. She was like, oh yeah, you guys, there was a battle every day. We stayed in your room to avoid the battle.
Yeah. She was talking about how horrible it felt when your dad came into the house.
Yeah. Just because there was, at that point in my life, it was like me and my mom were on a team and my dad was on a team. And there's a lot, the truth is my dad wasn't a bad guy. Now when I look back and understand the dynamics, I have so much compassion for him.
Right. I would have come home just fuming mad every time I walked through the house, given certain conditions that felt very powerless in how your mom handled herself as well. I'm not saying that he was justified. I just understand it.
Yeah, I understand it now too. So I don't feel angry at him. He's a great guy. I really love my dad and we've had a great connection, but there was a lot of anger and he grew up with a dad who was very short and mean and aggressive and dominant. And so my dad used to call me names. Sometimes he'd be like, you're so crabby, you're so bitchy, you're so whatever. And I remember knowing that I became like those to him. Like no one else talked to me like that, and no one else
what you tell me that I am, I will naturally bend towards acting out in that way. So if you tell me that I am an explosion of rainbows and sunshine. Yeah. That's how I'm going to act.
I'm going to become more like that. And so I was a lot like that. And I really believed, because my dad was so angry and my mom was fragile growing up, and I didn't know my mom was mentally ill back then. And so I really identified with my mom. Like, yeah, I was more like her in personality. We were night owls. We loved to sleep in. We could do nothing all day long. And my dad was like, let's do things. He was an early morning riser. So there's just like, we were on teams, and and my mom was really fragile. I knew that. My mom was, had high emotions all the time and felt really fragile. And so the way that I perceived what was happening, which this is how it is for kids, is you don't know the logic. You don't know all of the pieces. You're just collecting dots. And so I believed that it was my dad's anger that was ruining my mom's life.
Right.
I believed that she was a victim. And then she became sicker and sicker every year. And I believed my dad's anger is what made her sick.
Right.
And so I had a vow that I made in my childhood that was like, I will never let a man's anger run over me. I will never let a man destroy me the way my mom was destroyed. I will never let anger dominate me, basically. And Pizzi was talking about that too. She's like, you would go head to head with your dad. And it actually felt like protective, even for me, like of my mom. Here's my mom. She's really fragile and sick. And here's my dad who's angry. And I don't understand all of the dynamics back then. So I am going to step in because I think I'm stronger than my mom. I can take it. I'm going to go head to head with you, and I'm going to protect her.
Yeah.
Because she can't do this. And so it created a culture, and I didn't, honestly, the conversation I had with Pizzi was this week, which is we're 11 years into marriage. And I'm realizing, oh, anger was a day-to-day part of my life.
Yeah.
I don't think I remembered that. I remembered that my dad was angry. I remembered that I had to work through a lot of emotions about that. But I didn't realize it was a day-to-day part of my world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I came into our marriage with. I came in with not recognizing that I had battled with my dad a lot because I also loved him and we had great times. So it didn't feel like that was the whole thing. Like I lived in so much denial. I wouldn't have even noticed if it was.
Yeah.
So I just thought I have a great dad. I have a great mom. I love them. I'm getting married. Woo!
Yeah. And my background with anger and I've talked about this in the past, and this isn't really exposing my parents or anything. It was just a conversation we've openly had, and it's they have a beautiful heart about talking openly about it.
Yes, they're very redemptive and have been a huge part of your restoration process.
Right, totally. So my history was my mom would have fits of rage explosions. So she's yelling at the top of her lungs, screaming. I mean, at the top of her lungs, just a foot away from my face, if not closer.
Right.
At times,
in your face.
She's doing that, yelling at the top of her lungs at my dad over something. Occasional things were getting thrown around the house. There was that intensity with her. But my mom isn't the singular culprit of anger that I watched. My dad on job sites if you're driving in the car, he would yell and scream at somebody who's driving slow, and then he's honking and driving super fast around them, and almost like I'm waiting for him to run them off the road purposely.
Totally.
And then he would get on a job site and he would get intense and yell and scream about something happening inside of that space. It was frustration.
Yeah.
But it didn't just stop at my dad. Then I watched my grandfather, where you'd walk in and be like, "Hey, Grandpa," and he'd be like, "Huh, what are you doing?" And he'd get really aggressive. In fact, he was known in the town as one of the most angry, harsh men in the town of Glasgow, Montana, amongst business owners.
Oh, yeah.
I even had I would go to my dad's electrical shop after work or after school to go work, and there was a motorman named Ed. So Ed and Grandpa were mortal enemies. So he worked on electric motors.
Oh my gosh.
And he would be in there working. I'd be like, "Hey, Ed," and he'd go, "F you." And I'd be like, "Are you having a crabby day, Ed?" And then he'd turn and give me the middle finger. And then he would go back to working. And he wasn't joking.
Right.
That's how he would respond if you were nice to him. Occasionally, if you talked to him about his Harley Davidson, he'd be like, "Oh, yeah, look at what I got here." He'd be excited. But otherwise, you were living in an environment where the cultural
explosions were at any moment.
At any moment, that was the cultural norm, and the cultural norm to survive those, whoever could be most angry won. And I remember as I got into high school, my dad would be watching my mom and I, and we would be screaming literally at the top of our lungs back and forth. And he'd be like, "You guys need to stop this and calm down." And in the house, he wasn't going to do that. He was
totally.
But it was like, "Oh no, this is how I'm going to have to survive." And I remember one of the key moments with my grandfather. He had hurt my sister verbally, relationally in a moment at the shop, and I started screaming, "Arnie, you piece of ... And I mean, the cuss words are coming out. I was like, "Get your butt back here, blah, blah, blah." And it was, I just censored tons of it. The point was, Arnie comes out and I blast him with anger for the first time. I'm one of the few people that would ever stand up to him at that level.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember he came and he cried at the house about...
Because you blasted him because he had treated your sister poorly.
He had done it so bad, and he'd treated me so poorly in my history that I was
you can do that to me, but you cannot
I will
do that
not
to
do
her.
that to her. And so what I realized, he came home and he cried.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody ever saw Arnie cry.
No,
he cried with us.
He was a hard man.
He was a hard man that no one could approach. But I found his threshold of how much you have to push back on this guy. And once I found that threshold, okay, anger, if you find enough anger, you can find someone's threshold and break them from the abuse or the aggression that they have. So I was always like, okay, if it gets bad enough, I just have to find that threshold.
Totally.
And finally, I'm going to win.
Yeah, because he came, he cried, he repented. I think he said he loved you.
Yeah, he said, "And I'm so sorry that I haven't expressed love toward your father. I'm sorry that I've done all these things to you guys. I want you to know that I care. I don't want to hurt people. I don't mean to do what I do."
Yeah.
It
was miraculous. And so in your mind, that connects dots.
Yeah, that suddenly connects dots. Oh, this is what powerful is.
Yeah.
This is what it is to survive.
Now, the interesting thing is, so you had anger in your home life and then anger on the job site. There was like so much.
Well, and on the job site, it wasn't even from my dad. Then you go into the masculine environment. So the masculine environment is when there was a problem on the job site, it was F you, F that. It was, I'm going to knock your head off and this is what I'm going to do to you. And I've watched so many hammers be raised between guys.
Oh, totally.
I've watched guys throw major pieces of equipment and just throw it against the wall and dent entire walls. I've watched guys like whenever there was a major problem on a job site, it was going to be build, then level 10,000 explosion around a construction site.
Exactly.
And everyone's going to know. And then what you start learning is that anger is the universal conversation, especially within masculinity, between men that like, once I bark this loud, this is when you know that I am done with you. Right. It's not words, it's the barking that happens. So there's a universal language for a lot of men, especially in that type of culture, that this is how we're going to communicate pain, frustration. It's not going to be like, hey man, it's really getting on my nerves and I'm feeling really hurt by how you're handling this. Like this does, I don't appreciate this. No, it's just boom.
Boom. Well, and this is where I think some men choose to be emasculated. They're like, I don't fit into the angry,
right. I'm
crazy
not
culture.
Do that.
I can't do that. That will crush me.
So now I'm going to get ran over
and so
walked over my
so
whole
I'll
life.
just disengage from that part of masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that a lot. And did you have something to say?
No, you can go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so me and you came from wildly different cultures. I'd say my dad had anger, but it was never screaming at the top of his lungs at me. And it was never cussing. And it was so like,
but I would say it was sharp cutting.
Yeah.
It was
totally.
like, it was like death by a thousand razor blade cuts.
Yeah.
Which is something that you had when you came into the marriage.
Oh, 100%. And I knew it and I hated, you used to say like, you're using hate eyes. And I hated when you said it and I didn't want to admit to it when we first, like the first few years I was like, I'm not doing hate eyes, but inside I was like, I know what he's saying because my dad used to do that to me.
And it was more painful than screaming actually for me.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
It was very cutting.
Because it was this silent, like, I hate you. I want to obliterate you with my look. And I want you to know that you don't like matter to me or whatever. And I'm I just feel like I got destroyed without a single word.
Oh yeah. So we both had anger in our background and we, like most people, didn't have a discussion before we got married that was like, hey, what is the culture around anger for you? And what is the culture around anger for me? Like, and what are the normals and what are your rules?
What do you believe to be true about anger? How do you feel about it?
Yeah. What is okay?
Is there
what
healthy
is not
expressions
okay?
of it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We didn't have any of those conversations, which is probably good because I don't know if I would have married you if we would have. Mm-hmm. But I needed to marry you and you were a great person for me to marry.
And the truth is, my anger, as a side note, my anger was pretty submissive prior to marriage.
Yeah.
Where I remember one of my friends, Matt, who worked hand in hand with me when I was working for this guy, Sean. And we had one knockdown blowout day where it's screaming at the top of my lungs. And it literally was the reminiscent of my entire childhood with my mom. Yeah. I mean, screaming inches from each other's face and getting ready to throw things.
He's like that.
Yeah.
You and him would be like that.
We both finally hit that.
We both had that. Yep.
I remember when that happened, I was like, oh my God, where did this come from?
Surprise!
Because when
you've been out of the house for a while, you forget the family culture.
So the outward actions, I wasn't actively acting out.
No one was triggering those emotions.
I had those deep emotions though in my soul.
They were in there.
I could feel them. I could feel hatred towards people rise up and deep anger. And there were some times where I'd go off and blow off steam and punch stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd just be like, okay. But I didn't know that I was capable of that coming out of me ever again. And that moment hit me and I was like, what just happened?
Well, and I think that feels very true. Like you leave your house and you don't have people triggering you in the same way. No. They're not talking to you in that way. No. And so it feels like it's kind of like a sleeping giant.
Yep.
Some people don't experience that. They leave their home and they're still like, I'm going to fight with everybody.
Yes, I will continue this behavior because it is healthy. And I wanted nothing to do with it.
Right. It broke you and you hated it.
Yeah, totally.
But here's what the interesting thing is with anger is so much of it is about protecting yourself.
Yeah.
so much of like, so even the culture you're growing up in that you're talking about, like if you didn't have anger, how would you protect yourself?
You can't use your words. I mean, it's like you walk past a motorman and say, "Hey, Ed, that hurt." What? You're going to get thrown against the wall and be told to shut your damn mouth?
Totally.
Like, that's not, no.
There wasn't a way. And so and as a kid, you're not capable of thinking through what are the other options and what's a better protector. Like you don't have all that logic yet.
And there's when there's no authority there to protect you.
Right.
And that's what happened even for my grandfather. His father died at 10 years old. He was left to survive and take care of his mom and his siblings and until another man came into the picture. But he needed a protector, and that was going to be anger.
Oh, yeah.
People know that I'm tough, so they won't F with me, so we're going to be okay.
Yeah. So when we first got married, I think both of our anger was a surprise to the other person. Like the way my anger showed up, I think surprised you. The way your anger showed up surprised me.
Yeah.
Does that feel true? When we first got married?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was super surprising. As a side note, this was running through the back of my head. I don't even know why.
You were thinking.
Well, it was like a bunny trail, but I was thinking about how even my mom, because I was thinking of, we were talking about my dad's dad and stuff, but my mom, inside of her background, her dad was an alcoholic, and her mom was would get rage and get really angry because of the emotions about the alcoholism. And then I was thinking about the man who would abuse my mom. Like there was a man that used to beat my mom. She was
in a physically abusive relationship.
And so she had to learn how to survive. And I just remember, like, even when I processed that, I was like, at one point in my healing process with her and forgiveness process, I was like, oh, you're just a little girl who got thrown around and hurt really bad. And you were just like, I just need to protect myself.
Oh, yeah. And that is so true. Anybody who uses rage has a little kid inside of them that it feels terrified that they're going to be crushed and demolished.
Yep.
Like it is, people use anger to hold themselves together. They use anger to process their emotions, and they use anger to feel powerful. And so we get married and we start having explosions, and your culture of anger, we probably both had, anger looked different in my life because there were people that weren't angry. You had everybody was angry in your childhood.
Everyone's just angry.
But so when we got married, your culture of anger felt crazy to me.
Right.
I was like, this feels so out of control because no one's ever screamed in my face. My dad might have been giving me the hate eyes, but he was never in my face. He was never screaming. He was never cussing. He never felt out of control. And when you raged, you felt out of control. Like there would be times when you would like blackout rage. And what I mean by that, you never hit me. You never like that. But like where you wouldn't remember, like it didn't feel like you were driving anymore.
Right.
It felt like you had disassociated into the rage and something else was driving. And and then you wouldn't remember all the things that you said or did when that happened at the end.
Right. There was definitely a lot of survival that happened. And I remember like part of it was there was different components that sparked that on between the two of us. And I would watch as it was very, and I think we maybe discussed this in previous episode, but it was really hard to set boundaries with you.
Yeah.
In the sense of like, no, I just need space. I need to get away. And you would follow me. And one of my greatest fears as a kid is I couldn't get away from someone who was berating me or hurting me. And so I'd be like, I just need to go in this other room. Then you'd show up in the other room and you'd just keep talking at me. And I was very powerless. And then we're going to get into a conversation about powerlessness. But I felt deeply powerless to draw any line inside of the relationship, which I had this rule in my head that if I get in the car and actually leave, it'll end in divorce.
Right.
So I wasn't allowing myself to get out and leave.
Right.
So all of a sudden in this powerlessness, I bark.
Totally.
And my bark is like, and it wasn't even, there was super intense times, but in the beginning it wasn't as super intense. I'd be like, leave me alone.
You mean like the first month? Because by the second month, like when we were on the road trip, you like freaked out and were punching your car. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is
the steering wheel.
Yeah, you're punching your steering wheel.
There was a lot that added to that day.
I'm not saying that.
No, I'm not feeling attacked by it.
But what I am saying is like you took care of your car more than any other. It was your prized possession. You wouldn't let anybody hurt it. And then you were going freaking crazy on your car. And I'm saying that was a month into marriage. So I'd never been around somebody who used physical anger, who hit things. You never hit me, but you did hit things. Or you might throw something, never at me. But again, it was all of that felt so scary to me.
Well, which is what I'm going to get into is I would get these pieces of anger that would come up, and at some level I'm like, that wasn't even intense, because I'm thinking of actual intense, and you're terrified, because that's a level maybe 4 for my experience. That's not even close to the level 10 that I have. You're like, this is a level 10 expression of anger.
Yes.
Then you'd start matching me or going above my match at times.
Yeah. Well, so I felt really scared. Like
Right.
I was scared, and I had a vow.
Which I couldn't compute that you'd feel scared.
Well, and here's the other thing. When you showed up in anger, really it was the little boy showing up in anger.
Right. So I felt like I was 5 years old showing up in anger to someone who's bigger than me.
Yeah, because your mom was bigger than you when you were 5. And so you're never thinking you could hurt your mom when you're 5.
No.
I'm never going to physically hurt her. I'm not going to emotionally destroy her.
No.
I'm 5. So you would do that with me, but you're a grown man who's super buff. I mean, you are
I'll
so
take that.
hot. You are
I'll
sexy linebacker. But so you're huge. You're so much stronger than me.
Yeah.
And you're doing something that I have never
seen.
And
in your head, you don't know what the rules are for me. So
no,
over my
I don't
head,
know what the rules are.
There's no line that my brain can't compute the idea of actually physically hitting someone.
Right.
Right? Like I can't compute that I would do that. So there's nothing in me that's like, oh, I'm going to do that. In your world, you're like,
he's
I don't
out
know.
of control.
He's out of control. He may
me.
come over and hit me or something.
Yeah. I had no idea. I didn't know what to do. And so the thing inside of me, though, and here's for Enneagram lovers, I'm Enneagram is 2-wing 1. So 2s are the helper, but when they get stressed, they turn into 8s, which are the challenger. And Justin is an 8. And so this is where I always say, like, that part of my personality saved our marriage, because neither one of us got dominated. Like, because a different personality would have just buckled and let you rage and then just like
to which
broken.
Part of me, you say that saved it, and I may have a disagreement on that. I don't know that it didn't provoke it more.
Right.
On the other side, because I felt very much like, oh, this is just like my mom. This is just like my childhood. I will have to yell with this person because they're capable of doing that. And it felt like you'd match me and then go above.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in certain actions, but
I wouldn't ever, I never went above. See, and this is how, when you're triggered, the little kid self is coming out. So when you think I'm matching you and going above, I have no idea what I was doing, but I never physically got close to doing something that could actually threaten you, but you were scared.
Terrified.
But it was like PTSD.
Yeah, totally.
From your childhood.
I'm terrified, and I'm just trying to
And so what I'm doing feels less than what you're doing to me. So I never thought what I was doing was the same.
Every time, though, I see her match me or whatever, anything that looks similar to it, I'm going, no, I'm convinced I have to be like this.
Right.
She has a hatred inside of her, because I'd get the hate eyes.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, that hatred inside of her means she's going to eventually abuse me.
Right. Which, so here
so there's
I
not logic in it.
Yeah.
There's not actual,
when you're triggered in marriage, there's very little logic.
There's no adult healthy logic in it.
Logic.
But there is child logic. In anger, there's a ton of child logic.
And when you're triggered, your little kid from your childhood is showing up.
Yep.
And so I'm responding to my dad being like, no, you won't bully me. You won't destroy me. You won't make me sick. And you're responding to your childhood. You won't bully me. You won't destroy me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to stand up for myself. And then that creates an anger cycle. And I do just want to say this so that you guys get a picture, because I wasn't actually ever miserable in our marriage, even though we had anger. And I'm so thankful we don't have that
It was
anymore.
tough. I wouldn't feel miserable.
But what we did always do is we had great reconciliation.
Yeah, that was one of the huge parts of it, is that we were talking it out, crying it out, trying to find out where this was coming from.
We eventually would
it.
always get to vulnerability.
Yep.
We would always get to, oh, what you said reminded me of this time when I was a kid.
Right.
And I responded out of that. And then
so we wouldn't just ignore the vulnerable stuff.
Yeah, we wouldn't sweep it under the rug. And so it felt like, even though anger was coming up a lot, it felt like it was productive, because we'd have an anger outburst, and then we would be able to get underneath it and then find out something and then heal something from our stories.
Right.
And so it felt productive. And so that was going on. And then we got to, we ended up meeting with a counselor. At one
Before
point.
you tell us, I just I gotta tell on us on a few things.
Okay.
Because it's fun to share some of the stories and to show some of the bits of crazy. But I love showing the bits of crazy because I don't think that we're a perfect couple by any means now.
No.
But I think the goal is to see, like, even in the worst messiness, you can actually create a life that you want. And there was a life that we wanted to create, a culture, a heart culture, a relational culture that didn't have anger as a normal.
Yeah.
And it's not our normal anymore.
No.
It's not our standard anymore.
Nope.
The ways that we expressed anger. We may have anger moments, but it's a lot different.
But I mean, even the amount of time it happens is so much different. I feel like we're
Right.
thriving.
Totally.
I feel like both of us have broken like the stronghold of anger, the habit of hanger. The habit
Abby
of it.
has not broken the stronghold of that.
Wording. But I do actually, I agree with you. I think it's good to know, like, we watched one of our friends walk through a divorce, and there's no judgment on divorce. I'm not actually making a comment about that, but because for a year they had anger issues like this, and the whole time we wanted to be like, no, you really can get to the other side. Like, if you both are willing to work on it, and one of them was and one of them wasn't, and they're the one who chose the divorce, so that's okay. But the idea of, like, no, you can come from a marriage that's dysfunctional. You can come from two families that are dysfunctional.
Yep.
And you can actually become whole.
Yep.
You can actually create a totally different culture. You can create a totally different legacy. You can undo what you learned. You can rewrite the story. There's hope for every marriage. If you're out there, or you're just dating, or you have friendships where it's just like we hit explosions, whatever it is, I just want you to know there's hope for transformation.
Yeah. So I remember a couple times where I hulked out and flipped couches on their sides. I remember a time where you grabbed not a painting, but something like a painting, a wall decoration. You threw it at me in my direction. You're throwing it at the ground or something.
I was throwing it at the ground.
But it hit my toe, and I thought it broke my toe. I was flipping out at you on that. I've thrown punches into walls and dented walls on stuff. I broke a door. Mm-hmm. Slammed a door against a wall, and the something blew out on it, and I had to replace the door on it.
You broke a plate once.
I did?
Yeah, in the LA house.
I did?
Yeah.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you like threw it on the ground.
I don't remember.
Yeah, because I remember telling the story to Priscilla.
Did I drop it?
She was laughing so hard.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah, that's okay.
What are some of your crazy moments in anger that you can remember?
I don't know. I'd have to think.
Yeah. I remember a lot of times to get anger out. Like, anger, the reason I'm telling this is, like, something inside of me felt so, this is actually going to kind of go into powerlessness, but something inside of me felt like it had to get out, and I didn't know how to get it out. And inside of the anger, like, I had to somehow let the energy out. It felt like it was overtaking me internally.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, like, grabbing, it was like a baseball bat or a golf club, and going outside and just smashing the crap out of the ground, because it was like, this thing is going to swallow me alive.
Absolutely.
And like you said, it felt like it was bigger than me.
Totally.
Inside. And so I found myself, as we were going through the journey of the healing process, there were literal times where I had to throw myself on the ground. And it sounds crazy, but I could feel like, oh, I'm losing it, and I don't know how to manage how I'm, like, tweaking out. So I would literally just crumple myself onto the ground and just sit there so that I could, like, stop myself, because I didn't know what to do with it.
Totally. Yeah. So we start meeting with a counselor, and this is what I tell everybody. Listen, everybody emails me like, do you do premarital counseling? Blah, blah, blah. I think premarital counseling is important. Don't get me wrong, because there's some things that can weed out that's really important. But I think you should be doing you should do counseling your whole first year of marriage.
Yeah.
I don't know why we're paying for 5 sessions. You don't even know what you're not even triggered yet. You don't even know what you're angry at yet. You haven't worked through anything. You need a year of, and I think every couple should do it, whether or not you have a great relationship or not, just so you start out creating healthy habits. Seeing a counselor for us really helped us.
It totally did.
And
it would have saved us a whole lot of problems if we would have been able to engage that in
earlier.
the first year.
Yes.
We would have would have
changed
been
our
thrown
lives.
way further forward
Yes.
earlier on.
So that's why I want to tell you guys. And we didn't see a counselor because we were at breaking point, actually. We just saw a counselor because we thought we should. It's helpful.
Yeah, we didn't hit breaking point. We were like, we just need to get into a counselor.
Everybody should see a counselor before they are at divorce, before they are at
They
I need a
people
separation.
who come to me and they're like, I'm about at divorce. I turn them away every time because I'm like, this is not the time to come to me for help.
Yeah. And other people have a skill at that time, but
Yeah.
we're not crisis people.
No, I'm not a crisis person.
Yeah. So we went and we met a counselor. His name's Jason. And he was like, you can actually get the reconciliation and the deep connection that you guys have without the explosion.
Right.
And it was literally like, what?
Because what we realized is the explosion was connection.
Well, we would end with connection.
Right, but we associated the whole thing. It's like when a kid acts out and gets really bad, they feel connected when they haven't, like they're getting ignored by their parent.
So now when they act out, they get attention.
Right, so somehow the explosion, the reconnection moment, the conversations that come with it, we're going, oh, we're making a subconscious association with this is connection.
Yeah.
And when he's like, you could just have connection without having explosions.
Yeah.
You could actually get there by having conversations and talking about your needs. And we're going, what?
Totally.
You don't have to have the anger component?
Yeah. So that began, and then we ended up meeting with the counselor separately.
Yeah.
For a season where I worked through my anger issues and you worked through your anger issues. And that was an important thing for me because I was like, I can't be the person that is telling you need to work on your anger. I can't be the person motivating you towards that.
Yeah.
I can't be the person holding you accountable. I need there to be another person, and it was a man, and that felt helpful. I need there to be a man that he is working through stuff with you, and he's calling you on it when you're doing it, so that I step out of the role of being the one trying to because I was like, there's something going on here. Like there's something wrong. Again, our perspective was so different because you would have improved. Like maybe you were doing the best at anger you'd ever done, but it still felt crazy to me. Mm-hmm. And so you met with somebody else who worked with you, and then I met with somebody, and his work with me, and we talked about this last session, was you shouldn't use anger as a protector no matter what your husband does. And it wasn't him giving you permission to do anything. It was literally being like, you are responsible for you. You're responsible for your anger. You're responsible for your emotions.
Do you know, I remember in that season, like up until that point, the hardest thing for me is that it felt like you acted like you had no anger. So like, I would be like, when I tried to be like, no, I'm not the only one with anger. It felt like it always got put on to me as if I had the anger and you didn't have it. Well,
and it was that was so complicated because to me, my anger was acceptable. Like I wasn't screaming. Right. I wasn't cussing. I wasn't in your face. Well, I wasn't doing violence.
You did scream and cuss.
Well, yeah.
That's not true.
Totally. I did scream and cuss. That's very true. But what I mean is like your level, I always felt like I'm just protecting myself.
Right. You were like, I'm just protecting me. And I, on my end, was just saying, I'm just protecting me. And totally. that's what happened. And the focus, and the reason I say this is what was powerful in us getting separate and having these conversations, because as Danny was a guy that was working with you on that, right? Mm-hmm. Was Danny working with both of us? And he would say to you, like, there's no excuse for you to use anger. You have to decide out of that. And then, and he was calling us into being powerful people, because on my end, he was telling me the same thing, irregardless if she has this, and what felt good when I met with him is he was validating the fact that he saw your anger. And I'm like, okay, so I'm not crazy. She actually is doing stuff on her end. But then he was like, but that doesn't give you a reason to do what you're doing. Totally. And so he was calling us both back to being powerful people.
Yeah.
And everything that we've kind of been talking up until now is the idea of powerlessness.
Yeah.
For us, one of the major forms of anger that came out of us was this anger based in powerlessness. I am feeling powerless to the person across from me, so I am going to choose anger to find my power.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge key for people to look at, because a lot of times it was the minute when people started. I remember Jason, one of the other classic things that he said is, hey, Justin, you have words. You can use your words.
Totally.
And I was like, what does that even mean? And it's like, if you need something, if you're sad, if you're scared, you can actually communicate. I feel sad right now.
Yeah.
I feel scared right now. I feel overwhelmed. I'm feeling frustrated by how this is going down. I'm feeling disrespected inside of this situation. And what it was is he was empowering me to have power through my language that I use rather than through an expression of intense emotions, which was what a lot of people do is they go to an emotion that they have and then they use that to protect them rather than using their words and their boundaries.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that he talked about using your words with both of us had to do. So for like a little while, it sounded like a kindergarten class in our house.
Oh, it totally did.
Where I'd be like, use your words. And then you'd be back to me, use your words. Like, and it'd be so frustrating and annoying. But we both had the goal of we want to break this.
Yeah, we want to get out of this.
We want to get out of this cycle.
And that was where we started resetting what we called resetting the standard. Like, what is the standard of how we want to talk to each other and relate to each other emotionally? I think that something that, as we're talking about the idea of powerless anger, I want to talk about a few more forms of anger. With some of the
let's talk about where anger comes from.
So what we saw early on in our conversation is learned anger.
Yeah, like familiar anger, habits of anger. Like you learn, like just like you said, you learned the way to use your words is anger. Like that's the way to be heard. That's the way to be known.
Yes.
And so we have all of these things where our parents or our teachers or whatever culture, like the job site, teaches us rules. And that's where we learn this habit is okay and it's fine.
Yep. So, and what I learned about my learned anger is that it was not helpful.
No, not helpful at all. And so
it didn't do what I wanted.
The second form of anger that I would say is like powerlessness. And this is involved in so much anger.
Which is what I just kind of made a point of.
Yeah. And even like you got to think when you are being tickle tortured as a little kid by your older brother and you're like fuming on the inside and you're like, oh, I'll never let this happen to me again. Like that is like I'm angry in powerlessness. And there is a lie that we believe that if we are angry, we'll feel strong.
Yep.
That vulnerable emotions are weak and anger is strong. And so lots of people, like just like I did, I watched my mom, she felt fragile. Anger felt strong. So I'm going to be more like my dad felt stronger than my mom. So if I'm looking at them, one of my parents is weak and one of them is strong. I'm going to be like the strong one.
Yep, totally. Because I'm not going to be destroyed. And here's the deal. So one of the things that I saw in marriage is that when I actually got really tender and allowed myself to show the vulnerability of like, hey, this is really hurting me right now. I'd watch as you'd keep pushing at me on something that was really hurting me. And instead of me getting angry, I'd be like, babe, I'm not going to get angry. I'm just telling you, like, I don't know how else to tell you this, but it's hurting. And then I'm letting tears come to my eyes. Now, here's the deal. There are a lot of people that grow up in environments. So my environment was, I'll give you something to cry about if you want to keep crying. And so a lot of times we go, that's not going to work inside of my relationship if I actually feel. Because people, have relationships where someone goes, oh, you're just trying to manipulate me with your tears because they saw that happen as a kid, manipulation. But true vulnerability inside of our relationship where it's like, I'm not trying to manipulate you. You're welcome to keep acting angry towards me, but this is how it's really feeling inside. That's what started a healing process with us.
Yeah.
Is where we got to that and we had to watch, I just devastated that person.
Yeah.
Because anger never actually shows what you really feel inside.
No, I never knew your heart. I never knew your intentions. In fact, it probably took me longer to understand your intentions because of the anger.
Yeah.
And vice versa. It probably took you longer to understand that I was really for you and really loved you and really wanted to take care of you because of the anger I brought to the table.
Because there was something so much more powerful when I'd look at you and say, I'm actually really scared right now. Yeah. I feel really abandoned and out of control.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm going to come meet you. I like the matching.
And actually I mirrored you. One of the things I'll say is what you learn to do is give words to the kid inside who was driving. So like actually, like, so either the 5-year-old is throwing a temper tantrum at me.
Yeah.
Or the 5-year-old is telling me he's scared. Well, when I see the 5-year-old who's scared, I just feel so compelled by love.
Right.
When I see this
Compassion.
5-year-old who's throwing a tantrum at me, I feel like I need to protect myself. And that'd be the next type of anger that we talk about. There's protective anger. And this is really a lie. Like it never actually protects you.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually make your heart feel
You don't
less
feel
hurt.
more known. You don't feel more close. You just feel walled off, shut down,
You
disconnected.
don't get more seen.
But the minute you actually connect to what you really feel, like in general, when you start learning how to connect and be present with yourself, you realize that you've accumulated years of unprocessed pain that was actually just buried by a response of anger.
Yeah. Well, and something that I would say is like, I think being soft is more powerful than the hardest person. Now, I came into marriage believing being hard is what made you strong.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, oh, it takes way more courage to be soft.
Yep.
It takes way more courage to be tender. It takes way more courage to use your words and not use anger. Like, it takes way more. You're a warrior if you don't need war. If you don't need war, you're a warrior if you don't need anger to protect you.
And you know what? There again.
And anger's not bad in healthy ways. We're not trying
healthy
to
expressions. We're going to talk about a little bit of that. We don't have a whole lot of time left, but we're going to talk about that. But there was something inside of me, like when I resolved that irregardless of how you acted, I was going to choose on my end to be soft and tender.
Yep.
Even if you were like, oh, you're just you're acting out or whatever, I could sit there and go, all right, that's fine if you want to be angry, but I'm going to stay here. This is really hurting that you're staying angry, and I'm going to move on with life for this moment.
Well, and this is letting go of our anger as a protector probably is what dismantled anger for both of us.
Absolutely.
Because when I decided softness and vulnerability protects me more than anger does, I let go. Because both of us would never let down our shield. Because I kept up my shield to protect me from you, and you kept up your shield to protect you from me.
Yep.
And so this is what happens in lots of relationships. You get at a standoff where your trigger triggers them and their trigger triggers you, and you're waiting for the other person to change.
Who's going to give?
Yeah, who's going to
Somebody
give
tap
first?
out, please.
And I would say we both had to learn how to tap out. There were times when I would tap out before you. There's times when you would tap out before me. And when I mean tap out, I mean actually let down the wall, let down the guard, and choose something besides that.
And I remember at one point I had this I had a couple different crossroads where I had these types of inner dialogues, but I had a conversation with anger as if it's a person. I was like, anger, you are not benefiting me. Mm-hmm. You are not actually protecting me.
I've been friends with you.
I've been friends with you for years. You haven't helped me. You haven't saved me from pain. I still feel hurt in all these areas. In fact, I feel more hurt because I feel abandoned and alone and isolated because I have people at an arm's length when you're around.
You haven't helped people see me.
Nope.
I feel more misunderstood with you.
People don't know that I'm actually hurting. I'm really scared. And so I actually had to have this dialogue and build a case against anger in the form of how it was being expressed and operating in my life, and to dismantle it.
Absolutely.
And I went through kind of a divorce process with it. So another form of anger is sad anger.
Okay. You skipping the next one? I want to be heard anger.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I'm just whatever
You're just
order.
doing it.
It's
Okay.
irrelevant.
Well, can we do I want to be heard anger?
Sure, go ahead.
Just because I had it in my
Are you going
brain.
to get angry if I don't hear you on this?
I want you to hear me.
Uh-huh.
So I want to be heard is kind of like what you did with your grandpa Arnie. Like, I need to be heard. And this often happens like when somebody's not hearing what you're saying and they're not getting it, you somehow think that if you get louder, they will hear you better.
Right. And it's rooted in powerless anger.
Yes.
And it progresses into this anger is just me trying to be heard.
And so this is one of the areas that I think we had to, in order for us to get past the anger hump, the hurdle of anger in our lives, so I wanted you to validate how bad your anger affected me before I wanted to validate me having anger, because it feels like if you validate the other person, that means you're going to be less valid, and then I'm going to be heard less. So I'm using anger to try to be heard more and more. I could get angry about trying to tell you that you've been angry. And so one of the things that we had to do is both decide, like, it's not, I may or may not, he may or may not ever see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I can't use anger to try to make him see my point of view.
Yeah. So then there's sad anger is just an anger. Like a lot of people, because we're not allowed to feel sad inside of a home, we actually have anger that's coming out, and it's just because I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling sadness in this moment, but I'm going to say it through anger.
Yeah. And this is what I like to say. There are vulnerable and non-vulnerable emotions. And sad is a vulnerable emotion. And anger is a non-vulnerable emotion. And so that's why lots of people choose anger, because it
Very
doesn't
often,
feel vulnerable.
For some people, it feels vulnerable to say that they're angry.
Oh, that's true.
A cultural background.
Yeah,
There's
if
a lot
they
of
came from
shame
a family
about it.
where
Yeah.
anger wasn't allowed, then
then that can feel very vulnerable to acknowledge, I'm actually angry for the first time in my life about what happened.
Right.
Now, there's passive anger, which is the form of what your dad, was it kind of like your dad when he'd get quiet, or what was?
Well, no, I think passive anger is like where you will just you'll leave, you'll do silence,
Right.
you'll get manipulative,
Right.
or passive anger can
My
also.
dad did tons of passive anger in the home.
Like stubborn, where he'll
Yeah.
whatever you want to your mom, but then there'd be certain things he'd just hide behind her back and do.
Yeah, and do nothing. He's just angry at her for her behavior, rather than saying that, hey, I feel angry.
Even passive aggressive anger, which can be like, we're always sarcastic, we're always cutting. I'm actually angry at you, but I say it through like a funny joke. Like, I don't have a passive aggressive joke. I don't ever use that, so I don't know.
A coping anger, we call it
Yes.
coping anger, but it's like I'm coping for a moment, so I feel really tired or
Hungry.
sick.
I feel sick. I have crazy hormones. The anger, it comes out a lot like that. And so a lot of times in our relationship, when I get angry, I just need to go eat.
Right.
Like that's all I need to do to fix it. Or I need to go lay down. I need to walk away because I'm actually just not feeling good.
So when you know yourself, just your needs, you go better about your body and things like that. That's a form of anger that you're like, oh, I just
don't
need
have
this.
And it's funny because you can actually feel angry. And typically that's, again, I'm being powerless. I can actually just meet my own need. I can actually take myself out of this and take care of myself. And part of being powerful is knowing myself and knowing when I'm in those moments. That's why lots of couples get in fights when they're exhausted, when they're vulnerable, when things are intense. So we just went on a trip where our flights got canceled, and then we spoke a million times, and it was so fun.
Right.
Like, we loved the trip,
Yep.
but we were so tired. Both of us knew this is where we would get angry.
Yep. This is
So
where we could have an explosion.
we purposed in our hearts to be extra gentle.
Yep. Proactive at being kind, thoughtful, loving, thinking thoughts like, she's not against me. Nothing that's happening right now is about either of us. We're both really tired. Keep that in mind and give each other grace.
And we didn't fight, and it was beautiful.
Yeah, it was a great trip. It was amazing. Loved it.
And then there's punishing anger.
Right.
And punishing anger is, I'm going to make you feel the pain that I'm in.
Right.
So I'm either going to disconnect from you, or I'm purposefully going to say degrading things to you. Whatever it is I want you to feel what I'm feeling.
Absolutely. And so the whole idea is this, as we're talking about this, is anger is not something that's talked a lot about. And we want to expose that through our own journey and be able to get it on the table and start dialoguing about what is my anger? What kind of anger do I have? There's multiple probably other expressions of anger. This is just a small list to start the ball rolling so that you can start to look at it. And I think the question is, what is righteous anger? And that's a huge one that we have to navigate. And what is healthy expressions of anger that we can get into? But
because here's the thing, the grief process, if you don't get angry, you don't walk through the grief process.
Yep.
So I actually think anger is very important.
Anger is a huge part of loss.
It's a huge part
okay
of
to say
processing
I'm angry.
pain. It's a huge part of injustice.
Yep.
The Bible talks about God being angry. Jesus flipped over tables. So it's not a bad emotion, just in the wrong context.
There's something about sinning in our anger, like deliberately going out of our way to hurt, destroy people in our anger.
Or even if you're not deliberately, but you just still are.
Yeah, you're expressing anger in a way that's actually destroying people around you. Then we have to get ourselves in check.
Yeah.
But now I have anger often at people, but it's not rage anger. And it's anger that I'm able to go, oh, I'm actually justifiably angry. This is not okay. This person is doing very unjust things in their behavior and how they're acting out.
Yeah.
And now how am I going to go communicate and express that in a healthy form?
So I thought we would end this episode with validating each other so that couples could see what it'd be like.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, goodness.
What's going to happen here?
So I thought this is just to give an example of what
I did
it's
not
like
see
for
this
people.
coming, just so we all know.
You
This
didn't.
is her making up
It's a
everything
surprise.
on the spot.
But I can start and I can look like a rock star. So
no.
yeah, I'm going to do it. Okay. So Justin, I'm really sorry for the places that my denial about my childhood and my denial about my responses to you and my denial about, because of my fear, me not knowing how to take ownership for anger made you feel crazy. Like that you were the only person with anger in our marriage. I'm really sorry that I didn't, and I know I didn't do it out of protection. I thought if I take ownership, he will think what he's doing is okay and justified, but that's not healthy. Like, it's healthy for me to take ownership of whatever is mine to take ownership of. So I'm really sorry for the anger that I brought into the marriage.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for all of the places that you felt scared of me, even though it didn't make logical sense to me. Like, I didn't feel physically threatening to you. I'm littler than you. Even though it didn't make logical sense, I'm sorry for the places that it connected to the little kid inside of you, and that I didn't know how to validate that you were scared in it, that I didn't know how to validate that my anger felt traumatizing to you because of my perception of our two stories and what was happening. I didn't actually know how to see you. I only knew how to see my pain.
Right.
I'm really sorry for the vow I'd made against men that I would never let a man run over me. I'm sorry that I didn't learn how to get soft quicker. I'm sorry that I didn't see that softness would have been a key to your heart, that I didn't give you the benefit of a doubt. Like, I didn't think like, oh, he's a good guy, softness might work. Like, instead I was just like, no, he's gonna kill me, I'm gonna die. Not real kill. And if you're in a relationship where you're really concerned he'll actually kill you, get out. But I'm really sorry for the times that it felt like I wasn't taking ownership because I was trying to be heard. And so I wasn't communicating that I thought my part needed to change as much as your part needed to change. I'm sorry for the places that I reacted, and I'm sorry for giving you hate eyes. I hated when that happened to me. I would never want another human. And I actually felt that every time you said it. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to take ownership, but I also felt so sad because I knew how painful that felt. And so I'm sorry for every time that I gave you hate eyes and that it hurt.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I'm sorry for every place that you felt super scared. That it felt like I'm in my childhood again. And yet this version of my dad is worse than the dad that I experienced. Because this dad feels like he's even more aggressive than the other one. I'm sorry for where it made you feel small. I'm sorry for the expressions of my anger that made you feel insignificant. I'm sorry for the places where all you wanted to do was be soft and tender, but I didn't create a place for that part of you to thrive. I'm sorry for the assumptions that I made about your character and who you were based on my need to survive. So I'm sorry for the places where I assumed, oh yeah, your goal is to hurt me. And I assumed that you were against me. And I didn't assume the best about you. I'm sorry for all the places where it caused you to feel really hopeless inside of the marriage, where it felt like, oh, I don't know that I'm ever going to get out of this cycle. And I'm sorry for the places where it left you feeling like, I'm just going to have to survive him. I'm sorry for every moment that it felt like you were living in survival when I did those things. I'm sorry for the places that I wasn't more proactive at being powerful in the sense of figuring out solutions outside of us.
Yeah.
That I didn't get to that sooner, that I didn't know how to get to that or didn't choose that in where I lived blinded in that. And so I'm sorry for places where I didn't lead well, that I didn't lead well leading out of where we were at inside of stuff. I'm sorry for the places where I chose to be out of control and where it left you feeling really out of control. I thank you for not giving up. I thank you for being willing to submit your heart to counseling. I thank you for being willing to be honest. I thank you for being willing to rewrite the image of who I am in your head. Like after all of that, you've let me off the hook and not left it in your mind as though this is who Justin, this is what he did, this is who he is, and this is who he always will be. But you like chose inside of your heart to go, no, this isn't actually who he is. And I'm going to let his efforts, because there's a million efforts I made to get out of it. And you could have been like, that's not enough. I'm still not going to trust it. You chose to trust in my efforts and allow my healing process actually be worth something to you.
Yeah.
And you've chosen to see me through the different lens of who I am today compared to who I was choosing to be back then.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And I'm sorry.
So thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. This is something that I would recommend, that if you have done anger in a way that has hurt somebody, that you actually take ownership. Taking ownership is one of the most important things you can do to bring healing to you. It's not about the other person.
Ownership isn't taking on a bunch of shame.
Nope.
People have a broken idea of what ownership is.
No.
They think I just have to feel really bad about it. I felt really bad the entire time about stuff.
Oh yeah, you felt shame the entire time.
That wasn't ownership. Ownership is me and her right now, like what you just saw, is going, I see you. This is how it probably made you feel. I'm sorry about that. It matters to me. Yeah. Please forgive me.
And it wasn't okay.
Yeah, and it wasn't okay.
Even though I was using anger to protect myself, that wasn't okay. What I did, like my intention wasn't bad, but what I did to you was. So that's not okay.
Yep.
So I would recommend taking ownership for you if you need to. And then something I think is really important is making a list of what your family culture has said, what your rules have said about anger, and then beginning when you start to get angry, to learn to check in, like what is actually going on. And do I need to use my words? And do I need to walk away? Do I need to set a boundary? What do I need to do? And if you're in a house where you guys are just like, it is anger city, it's anger, back and forth between you two, and you don't know how to break the cycle, my challenge to you would be to meet with a counselor to begin to disarm that pattern. Yep. I haven't read this book, but somebody recommended The Dance of Anger as a book about anger. So I'm just trying to give resources to people if they feel stirred up on steps to take.
Right. And so last but not least, coming up here in the near future this year, we're working on a singles course.
Yep.
Online course, maybe I don't know, we'll do not just a course.
I don't know what you're saying, but we're going to do a singles course. You're looking at me like I should read your mind. We're going to do a singles course, and we're going to do a married online course. And we have several others in the works. So if you're interested in that, we just email us and we will send you the information as it comes. You can email us at LFA, which stands for Living Fully Alive, @gmail.com.
No, that's not right.
No?
No, not even close. Oh my gosh. Let go of the wheel. First off, you can go to stumballconsulting.com and you can just sign up for our mailing list there for any of our updates on details. Or you can email us at lfa@stumballconsulting.com and you can say, sign me up for things, or specifically, I want to know about the singles course, or I want to know about the married course. But that's something that we're wanting to develop and get out there in people's hands to really walk through the journey of marriage and give some of the tools that we've had in marriage and in single life. So we're going to be working on that in the future.
Absolutely.
And then you can check us out on Instagram, Abby Stumball, Justin Stumball, and get on Facebook.com /
like us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry.
The connect.
Facebook.com.
You just need to be quiet over there.
My brain went too fast.
The Connected Life podcast. on Facebook, and you can like us there. But also jump on, if you've been touched by anything today, jump on to whatever you're listening to, iTunes or whatever, rate, review, subscribe, and share, because that helps get the message out. And we want to just touch people's lives and get these conversations going in other people's worlds.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, I'm so angry.